Emma traced her fingers along the ornate wainscoting, feeling every groove and imperfection in the aged wood. The Victorian mansion on Blackwood Hill had stood for over a century, weathering storms both meteorological and metaphorical. Now it was theirs, hers and Daniel's, a steal at a price that should have raised more suspicion than excitement. "Can you believe it?" Daniel called from the foyer, his voice echoing through the empty rooms. "All this space, for what we paid." He appeared in the doorway, dust motes dancing in the late afternoon sunlight behind him. His excited smile faltered when he saw Emma's expression. "What's wrong? Having second thoughts already?" "No, not at all," Emma said, forcing brightness into her voice. "It's just, do you ever get the feeling that this place is watching us?" Daniel laughed, crossing the room to wrap his arms around her waist. "Old houses creak and settle, they have personality. That's why we wanted something with history, remember? Not some soulless suburban box." Emma nodded, leaning into his embrace. Maybe he was right. The house was simply adjusting to new occupants after standing empty for so long. 3 years vacant, according to the real estate agent, a dour woman who had seemed oddly reluctant to show them the property despite its extended time on the market. "Besides," Daniel whispered into her ear, "just think of all the room for your studio upstairs. Natural light from those big bay windows. The perfect place to paint." Emma smiled, genuine this time. "And your office, in the library?" "Exactly. Our fresh start." Daniel kissed her temple. "Let's finish unloading the truck before it gets dark. I don't think the electricity is completely sorted yet." As they carried boxes and furniture from the moving truck, the house seemed to absorb their possessions, swallowing the modern intrusions into its antique embrace. Their contemporary sofa looked almost comically out of place against the hand-carved fireplace mantel. Emma's collection of art books disappeared into the built-in shelves, as if they'd always belonged there. By nightfall, they had managed to set up their bedroom on the second floor, a spacious room with tall windows and a ceiling high enough to accommodate the four-poster bed Emma had insisted on buying to match the house's vintage character. Daniel assembled it while Emma unpacked their bedding, both of them too exhausted to notice the slight discoloration on the hardwood floor beneath the bed's new position. "First night in our new home," Daniel said, as they finally collapsed onto the mattress. He reached for the lamp on the nightstand, a modern touchscreen affair that looked jarringly out of place. "Wait," Emma said, grabbing his wrist. "Do you hear that?" Daniel froze, listening. "The wind?" "No, it's like voices." Emma sat up, her eyes scanning the darkened corners of the room. "Very faint, like someone whispering." Daniel listened for another moment before shaking his head. "Just the house settling, like I said." He kissed her forehead. "Or the neighbors. Sound carries strangely in these old places." Emma wanted to point out that their nearest neighbors were a quarter-mile down the winding driveway, but exhaustion was pulling her eyelids closed. "You're probably right," she murmured. Daniel turned off the lamp, and darkness enveloped them. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into sleep. Emma lay awake a while longer, staring at the ceiling and listening. The whispers had stopped, if they had ever been there at all, but as she drifted towards sleep, Emma could have sworn she heard a soft voice say, quite distinctly, "They're here now." Emma woke to weak morning light filtering through the curtains they hadn't properly hung yet. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The ceiling was too high, the windows positioned wrong. Then it all came rushing back. The move, the Victorian, their fresh start. She reached across the bed, finding Daniel's side empty but still warm. The smell of coffee drifted up from downstairs, and she smiled. Always the early riser, her husband had apparently already started unpacking the kitchen. As she sat up, something caught her eye, a small dark spot on the pristine white wall opposite the bed. Emma frowned. Had that been there yesterday? She was certain they'd inspected every inch of the house before moving in, cataloguing the areas that needed repair or repainting. Slipping out of bed, she padded across the cold wooden floor for a closer look. It wasn't a spot at all, but a tiny hole, as if someone had pushed a pencil point into the plaster. Emma ran her fingertip over it, feeling the slight depression. "Odd. Breakfast is served, madam," Daniel announced from the doorway, balancing a tray with 2 mugs of coffee and some slightly burnt toast. "Well, it's not much, but it's the best I could manage with what we've unpacked." Emma turned away from the wall. "My hero," she said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Have you noticed any small holes in the walls downstairs?" Daniel set the tray on the bed. "Like picture hook holes, probably." "Why, no, more like..." Emma hesitated, unsure how to describe it. "Never mind, it's probably nothing." They spent the day unpacking, arranging and rearranging furniture until rooms began to take shape. Emma focused on setting up her studio in what had once been a nursery, a bright, airy room with windows on 2 sides. She carefully unpacked her canvases, paints, and brushes, arranging them meticulously in the new space. As she worked, she noticed how the floorboards seemed to creak in her wake, as if the house were tracking her movements. Once, when she paused to look out the window at the overgrown gardens below, she could have sworn she heard a faint sigh behind her. Emma spun around, but the room was empty. "Just settling," she muttered to herself, echoing Daniel's explanation. By late afternoon, fatigue had set in. Emma descended the grand staircase to find Daniel in the kitchen, struggling with a stubborn pipe beneath the sink. "Should we call a plumber?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. Daniel emerged, his face flushed with exertion. "And admit defeat on our first full day? Never." He wiped his hands on his jeans. "Besides, I've almost got it. Just needed to tighten the..." A loud bang echoed through the house, making them both jump. It sounded like a door slamming shut with tremendous force. "What was that?" Emma whispered, her heart racing. Daniel was already moving past her toward the sound. "Probably a draft. I bet we left a window open somewhere." Emma followed him through the dining room and into the front hall. All the windows were closed. The front door remained firmly shut, its antique lock engaged. "See, nothing to worry about," Daniel said, though he continued scanning the foyer with a slight frown. "Old houses make all kinds of noises, I guess," Emma replied, unable to shake the unease that had settled over her. "I think I'm going to take a break and walk the grounds a bit, clear my head." Outside, the late September air held a crisp hint of the autumn to come. Emma followed a stone path that wound through gardens long since gone wild. Blackberry brambles had overtaken what once must have been meticulous flower beds. An ancient oak tree dominated the side yard, its massive branches stretching toward the house like gnarled fingers. Behind the house, Emma discovered a small family cemetery, not uncommon for estates of this vintage. 6 weathered headstones stood in a neat row, most so eroded that their inscriptions were illegible. The newest-looking stone belonged to someone named Elizabeth Wakefield, who had died in 1952. Wakefield, that had been the name of the family who built the house, according to the limited historical information the real estate agent had provided. Emma made a mental note to research them further. Perhaps the local historical society would have records. As she knelt to clear some weeds from around Elizabeth's headstone, Emma felt a cold prickle at the back of her neck. She turned quickly, half expecting to find someone watching her from the house. The windows stared back, empty and dark, despite the afternoon sun. Except Emma squinted. Was that a figure in the window of her studio? Just for a moment, she thought she saw the silhouette of a person standing there, observing her. Then it was gone. "Daniel," she called, rising to her feet. Had he gone upstairs to look for her? As if in answer, Daniel appeared from around the side of the house, a rusty shovel in hand. "Found a whole shed full of garden tools," he announced. "Once we clear out the spiders, we could actually do something with these gardens." Emma looked back at the window. "Empty. Were you just upstairs?" she asked. "No, I've been poking around the shed for the last 20 minutes. Daniel followed her gaze to the house. "Why? I thought I saw someone in the studio window." A brief flicker of concern crossed Daniel's face before he masked it with a smile. Probably just a reflection. The glass in these old windows can do weird things with light. Probably, Emma agreed, though she wasn't convinced. She linked her arm through his. Did you know there's a family cemetery back here? Really? How gothic. Daniel grinned. Our very own pet cemetery. Just don't bury me there if I die. Okay. Not funny, Emma said, elbowing him lightly. Come on, I'll show you. They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the property together, though by the time they returned to the house, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. Emma tried to ignore the sense that the house looked somehow expectant, its windows gleaming with the reflected sunset like watchful eyes. That night, they ordered pizza, a surreal modern intrusion into the historical setting, and ate it picnic style on the living room floor, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. To our new beginning, Daniel said, raising a beer bottle in toast. Emma clinked her bottle against his. To us. Later, as they lay in bed with the lights out, Emma found herself listening again for the whispers she thought she'd heard the night before. The house was silent except for Daniel's steady breathing and the occasional creak of timber. She was just drifting off when she heard it, a soft, indistinct murmur, like someone talking in the next room. Emma's eyes snapped open. The sound wasn't coming from elsewhere in the house. It seemed to emanate from the wall itself, just beside her head. Should have left, the wall whispered. Dangerous here. Emma sat bolt upright, her heart hammering. Daniel, she hissed, shaking his shoulder. Daniel, wake up, he groaned, rolling toward her. What's wrong? Listen, she urged. The walls, they're whispering. Daniel propped himself up on one elbow, blinking sleepily. They both sat in silence for a long moment. I don't hear anything, Em, he said finally. It was right there, a voice coming from the wall. It said it's dangerous here. Daniel reached for the lamp and switched it on. In the sudden light, Emma could see the concern in his eyes. It was probably just a dream, he said gently. You were falling asleep. It wasn't a dream. I was wide awake. Emma pressed her hand against the wall. It came from right here. Daniel placed his hand over hers. These old houses have all kinds of quirks. Could be pipes. Could be the wind finding a crack somewhere. It was words, Daniel, clear words. He hesitated to look. It's been a stressful couple of days. Moving is exhausting. And this place is very different from our apartment. It's going to take some time to get used to all its noises. Emma wanted to argue, to insist that what she'd heard was more than just house noises, but the calm rationality in Daniel's voice made her doubt herself. Had she imagined it? Was her mind playing tricks on her in this unfamiliar environment? You're probably right, she conceded. Sorry for waking you. Daniel kissed her forehead. Don't apologize. We're in this together. Remember, if anything ever really scares you, I want to know about it. He switched off the lamp and pulled her close. Emma nestled against him, taking comfort in his solid warmth. But as she lay there in the darkness, she couldn't shake the certainty that she'd heard those words. And just before she finally fell asleep, she thought she caught another whisper, too faint to make out clearly, but unmistakably there. A voice speaking from within the wall beside their bed. The next few days passed. In a blur of unpacking and organizing, Emma threw herself into arranging her studio, hoping that establishing a workspace would help her feel more at home. The strange incidents, the whispering, the figure in the window receded in her mind, overshadowed by the mundane tasks of settling in. Daniel had taken a week off work to help with the move, but he would need to return to his architectural firm in the city soon. Emma, who worked as a freelance illustrator, had more flexibility but also several looming deadlines. By Thursday, they had established enough order to begin focusing on their respective work. Emma sat at her easel, sketching concepts for a children's book about woodland creatures. The morning light streamed through the tall windows, creating the perfect illumination for detailed work. She found herself relaxing for the first time since they'd moved in, absorbed in the familiar comfort of creation. A soft scratching sound interrupted her concentration. Emma paused, brush hovering over the watercolor paper. The sound came again, a distinct scraping, as if something was moving inside the wall beside her. Mice, she muttered. An old house like this was bound to have rodents. She made a mental note to tell Daniel they should set traps. The scratching stopped, replaced by what sounded like a sigh, a very human sigh. Emma set down her brush and approached the wall cautiously. The sound had come from behind a section of ornate wainscoting. She pressed her ear against the wooden paneling and held her breath, listening. "She hears us," whispered a voice, unmistakably a voice this time, not the wind or pipes or settling timber. Emma jerked away from the wall, her heart racing. "Hello," she called, feeling foolish, but unable to stop herself. "Is someone there?" Silence answered her. Then, as she took a step back, the voice returned, so faint she had to strain to hear it. "Happened before, will happen again." Emma pressed her hands to her mouth, stifling a gasp. She wasn't imagining things. The walls were actually whispering, or rather, something within the walls was. She needed to tell Daniel. He would know what to do, how to explain this. Emma turned to leave the studio, but as she reached for the doorknob, the temperature in the room plummeted. Her breath clouded in front of her face, even though the September day outside was mild. "Don't sleep in that room," the wall behind her said, louder now, more distinct. "Blood soaked through. Never came out." Emma froze, her hand on the doorknob. "What room?" she whispered, not turning around. "What blood?" "Master bedroom. She died there." He made sure of it. A cold sweat broke out across Emma's skin. Their bedroom, the discoloration on the floor that she'd noticed when they arrived. Was that what the voice meant? "Who died?" Emma asked, her voice barely audible. "Who are you?" The temperature in the room suddenly returned to normal. The oppressive feeling lifted, and Emma sensed she was alone again. She wrenched open the door and hurried downstairs, calling for Daniel. She found him in the library, unpacking books onto the built-in shelves. He looked up at her with a smile that quickly faded when he saw her face. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I heard them again," Emma said, hugging herself. "The voices in the walls, they were talking about our bedroom, saying someone died there, that there's blood under the floor." Daniel set down the books he was holding and crossed to her. "Emma, listen to me. This house is over 100 years old. Of course people have died here, probably in every room at some point. This wasn't just someone dying of old age," Emma insisted. The voice said he made sure of it, like it was murder. "Daniel," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Okay, let's think about this logically. First, old houses make all kinds of strange noises. Second, you've been under a lot of stress with this move, and your deadlines. And third, we specifically picked a Victorian house because we both love Gothic aesthetics and atmosphere. Maybe your imagination is just, I'm not imagining things," Emma snapped, stepping away from him. "I know what I heard." Daniel held up his hands in a placating gesture. "I'm not saying you didn't hear something. I'm saying there are rational explanations. This house has forced air heating. The ducks could be carrying sounds from the street, or even from another part of the house, in ways that make it seem like they're coming from the walls." Emma wanted to believe him. The alternative, that their dream home was somehow haunted, or that she was losing her grip on reality, was too frightening to contemplate. "How about this?" Daniel said, taking her hands. "I'll call the real estate agent and ask if there's any unusual history associated with the house, and we can research the previous owners. If anyone was murdered here, there should be records." Emma nodded, feeling slightly calmer. "I'd like that, and maybe we could move to one of the other bedrooms, just until we know more." Daniel hesitated. "The other bedrooms don't have beds set up yet. We could move the mattress," Emma pressed, "just temporarily. If it would make you feel better." "Sure." Daniel squeezed her hands. "But I really think you're going to feel silly about this in a few days when we discover it's just weird." acoustics or a prankster neighbor with a ham radio frequency that's bleeding into our electrical system, or something. Emma attempted a smile. I hope you're right. That afternoon, Daniel called Marjorie Hewitt, the real estate agent who had sold them the house. Emma could hear only his side of the conversation from where she sat at the kitchen table, pretending to work but actually straining to listen. Yes, we're getting settled in just fine. Actually, we were curious about the history of the property, previous owners, any interesting stories. Aha, the Wakefields originally. We know that much, and after them. I see. Well, what about any, incidents at the property? No, nothing specific, just curious. When he hung up, Daniel's expression was unreadable. He sat down across from Emma. So according to Marjorie, the house was built in 1887 by Theodore Wakefield, a lumber baron. His family owned it until 1953, when it was sold following the death of Elizabeth Wakefield, the woman whose grave you found. After that, it changed hands several times before being purchased by a Dr. Richard Conroy in 1972. He lived here alone until his death in 2019, which is why the house has been vacant for 3 years. Did she mention any deaths, murders? Emma asked. Daniel hesitated. She said there was a tragedy in the Wakefield family in the 1920s. Apparently Theodore's son James and his wife Evelyn lived here then. The story goes that Evelyn fell down the main staircase and died. Marjorie seemed uncomfortable discussing it, said it was ancient history and not something we should worry about. She fell down the stairs. That sounds suspicious, or just unfortunate. Houses this old often have hazardous staircases by modern standards, Daniel pointed out. Anyway, I asked if there were any deaths reported in the master bedroom specifically, and she said no, not that she was aware of. Emma frowned. So either the voice was wrong, or Marjorie doesn't know the full history. Daniel finished. Look, I think we should visit the local historical society tomorrow. They'll have newspapers, records. We can find out exactly what happened here over the years. True to his word, Daniel helped Emma drag their mattress into one of the spare bedrooms that evening. The room was smaller than the master, with just one window and simpler moldings around the ceiling. Cozy, Daniel commented, as they made up the bed with fresh sheets. There was a forced cheerfulness in his voice that told Emma he was humoring her. That night, Emma lay awake long after Daniel had fallen asleep, listening intently. The house remained silent, except for its usual creaks and groans. No whispers came from these walls, yet Emma couldn't relax. Ever since the voice had mentioned blood beneath the floor, she hadn't been able to stop thinking about the discolored section of hardwood in the master bedroom. Was it really just an old stain from water damage or something more sinister? When Daniel's breathing had deepened into the steady rhythm of deep sleep, Emma slipped out of bed. Taking her phone for light, she padded silently down the hall to the master bedroom. The room felt colder than the rest of the house, though perhaps that was just her imagination. Emma directed the phone's beam toward the spot where their bed had been, illuminating the section of floor that had caught her attention on their first night. In the harsh light of her phone, the discoloration was more pronounced than she remembered, a dark patch about 3 feet in diameter that seemed to have seeped into the grain of the wood. It could have been anything: wine, ink, oil. But as Emma knelt for a closer look, she noticed something else: tiny holes in the floorboards around the stain, similar to the one she'd found in the wall. These were arranged in a rough circle, as if something had once been nailed down around the stained area. Emma ran her fingers over one of the holes. The wood around it felt different from the rest of the floor, newer somehow, as if this section had been repaired or replaced. Looking for secrets, whispered a voice directly behind her. Emma whirled around, her phone clattering to the floor. The room was empty, but the whisper had been unmistakable, and much closer than the muffled sounds from within the walls. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. "She knows," came another whisper, this time from the corner of the room. She'll tell him what we saw. Shouldn't have come back, added a third voice from somewhere near the window. Not safe. Emma scrambled for her phone, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it again. The flashlight beam swung wildly around the room, revealing nothing but shadows. The carpet hid it, said the first voice, seemingly right beside her ear now. But the floor remembers. Wood absorbs. Stone records. These walls have seen everything. What happened here? Emma whispered, turning slowly in place, trying to track the source of the voices. Please tell me. Ask the doctor, said the voice near the window. He knew, that's why he came. And why he died, added the voice behind her. A sudden gust of cold air extinguished Emma's phone light, plunging the room into darkness. She gasped, frantically pressing the power button, but the device remained dead. He's coming, the voices whispered in unison, and then fell silent. Through the darkness, Emma saw the doorknob turning. Her heart seemed to stop as the door slowly swung open. Emma, Daniel's sleepy voice broke the tension. What are you doing in here? Relief flooded through her, so intense she nearly collapsed. Daniel, she breathed. Oh God, you scared me. He stepped into the room, looking confused. I woke up, and you were gone. Are you okay? They were here, Emma said, the words tumbling out. The voices, not in the walls this time, in the room with me. They said to ask the doctor about what happened, that he knew why he came here. Daniel stared at her for a long moment. In the dim light filtering through the window, his expression was unreadable. Dr. Conroy, he said finally. The man who owned the house before us. That's who they must mean. They said that's why he died, Emma added, her voice small. Daniel sighed, running a hand over his face. Emma, come back to bed. We'll go to the Historical Society first thing tomorrow. But right now, you need sleep. He held out his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Emma took it, allowing him to lead her from the room. Neither of them noticed the small dark handprint that appeared on the wall beside the door as they left, a print far too small to belong to either of them, and which would be gone by morning. The Blackwood Hill Historical Society occupied a stately Greek Revival building on the town's main street. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and furniture polish. A gray-haired woman, with wire-rimmed glasses, looked up from her desk as Emma and Daniel entered, her expression brightening at the prospect of visitors. Well, hello there, she greeted them. How can I help you folks today? We're researching the history of a property we recently purchased, Daniel explained. The old Wakefield house on North Ridge Road. The woman's smile faltered slightly. Oh, you're the couple who bought Theodore's place. Word travels fast in a small town. She stood and extended her hand. I'm Margaret Finch, the Society's archivist. My grandmother was a Wakefield, actually, a distant cousin of Elizabeth's. It's nice to meet you, Emma said, shaking the offered hand. I'm Emma Chen, and this is my husband Daniel. What kind of information are you looking for? Margaret asked, gesturing for them to follow her deeper into the building. We'd like to know more about the house's past owners, Daniel said. Any notable events or incidents that might have occurred there. Margaret led them to a research room, lined with filing cabinets and bookshelves. Having some strange experiences up there, are you? She asked, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp behind her glasses. Emma and Daniel exchanged a glance. What makes you say that? Emma asked. Let's just say you're not the first owners to come asking about the house's history. Margaret pulled out a chair at a large oak table. The Wakefield house has always had a reputation. What kind of reputation? Daniel asked, taking a seat beside Emma. Margaret disappeared into a back room, returning moments later with several archival boxes and a bound volume. The original Theodore Wakefield was a complicated man, she began, setting the materials on the table. Made his fortune in lumber, as you probably know, but there were always rumors about his business practices. Some said he wasn't above sabotaging competitors' operations or threatening those who stood in his way. She opened one of the boxes and carefully removed a sheaf of yellowed newspaper clippings. He built the house in 1887 for his wife Augusta, who died in childbirth the following year. Their son James was raised primarily by nannies, while Theodore expanded his empire. She passed them a photograph of a stern-looking man, with a thick mustache, standing beside a woman in Victorian dress, a baby in her arms. When James grew up, he married a local girl named Evelyn Morris in 1915. Margaret continued, extracting a wedding announcement from the pile. They lived in the house with Theodore, who by then was in his 70s. By all accounts, Evelyn was a lively, modern woman, perhaps too modern for her father-in-law's tastes. There were rumors of tension in the household. Emma studied the wedding photograph. Evelyn had been beautiful, with dark hair, and a confident smile that seemed at odds with the formal stiffness of such pictures from that era. James looked uncomfortable beside her, his expression somewhere between pride and anxiety. What happened to them? Emma asked, already suspecting the answer would connect to what she'd heard in the house. Margaret hesitated. In 1922, Evelyn died in what was officially ruled an accidental fall down the main staircase. She was 27 years old. She slid a newspaper clipping across the table. The headline read, "Dobier Field Hare's wife perishes in tragic accident." But people had their doubts, Daniel guessed. "Small towns run on gossip, Mr. Chen," Margaret said. And there was plenty surrounding Evelyn's death. Some said she and James had been arguing that evening. Others claimed Theodore had threatened to disinherit James because Evelyn hadn't produced an heir after 7 years of marriage. There were even whispers that Evelyn had been having an affair. Emma felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. "Do you think she was murdered?" Margaret adjusted her glasses. "I couldn't say. The coroner at the time found no evidence of foul play. But, Daniel prompted, 3 months after Evelyn's death, one of the household maids, Clara Jenkins, hanged herself in the gardener's shed. She left a note claiming she couldn't live with what she knew. The note was reportedly destroyed by Theodore, but not before several people had seen it." Emma exchanged a glance with Daniel. "The voices," she murmured. "They said she knows and she'll tell him what we saw." Margaret raised an eyebrow but didn't comment on Emma's words. Instead she continued her narrative. Theodore died in 1924. James never remarried, and became something of a recluse, living alone in the house until his death in 1951. His cousin Elizabeth inherited the property, but sold it shortly before her own death in 1952. "And after that?" Daniel asked. "We know it was eventually purchased by a Dr. Richard Conroy in the 1970s. Margaret nodded. Between the Wakefields and Dr. Conroy, the house changed hands several times. None of the owners stayed long. Most cited the expense of maintaining such a large property, but locals suspected other reasons. She gave them a significant look. "The house has always had a reputation for being unsettled." "What about Dr. Conroy?" Emma asked. "What brought him here?" "The doctor." Margaret opened the bound volume, which turned out to be a scrapbook of more recent newspaper clippings. Richard Conroy was a respected psychiatrist who retired from his practice in Boston and moved here in 1972. He was a quiet man, kept to himself mostly, but was known for his interest in local history, particularly the Wakefield family. "Did he ever mention why he was interested in them specifically?" Emma pressed. "Not publicly, but he was a regular visitor here at the Historical Society." Margaret flipped through the scrapbook until she found what she was looking for. "Dr. Conroy died in 2019, a heart attack, according to his obituary. He was 87. Emma leaned forward to read the short obituary. It mentioned Conroy's distinguished career and his passionate pursuit of historical truth. It gave no details about family or close friends. "Did he leave any research notes or journals?" Daniel asked. "If he was studying the Wakefield family for decades, he must have compiled information. If he did, they weren't donated to us. Margaret replied. I assumed any personal papers would have remained at the house. Emma and Daniel looked at each other. They had been living in the house for nearly a week, and had found no sign of such papers. There is one more thing about Dr. Conroy that might interest you, Margaret said, lowering her voice slightly, even though they were alone in the room. Before he retired to Blackwood Hill, he specialized in a rather controversial field, paranormal psychology. He wrote several papers on what he called residual psychological imprints on physical environments. You mean ghosts? Daniel asked, skepticism evident in his tone. Not exactly, Margaret replied. From what I understand of his work, Dr. Conroy didn't believe in spirits of the dead. Rather, he theorized that intense emotional experiences could somehow be recorded by certain materials, wood, stone, water, and then replayed under specific conditions, like an old phonograph record. Emma felt her pulse quicken. That sounds like what's happening in our house, voices from the past being replayed. Daniel gave her a concerned look, but addressed Margaret. Do you have any of his published works here? I'm afraid not. His academic papers would be in medical journals, not local historical records. Margaret closed the scrapbook. But if his theory was correct, and if he chose that house specifically to study this phenomenon, then his research must still be there somewhere. Emma finished. We need to find it. Margaret studied them for a moment. May I ask, what exactly have you experienced in the house? Emma hesitated, looking to Daniel. He gave a slight nod, apparently deciding that holding back information from someone who could help them made little sense. I've been hearing voices, Emma admitted. At first they seemed to come from inside the walls, but last night they were in the room with me. They talk about someone dying in our bedroom, about blood soaking into the floor. If Margaret was shocked by this revelation, she didn't show it. Have you noticed any pattern to when these voices appear? Time of day, weather conditions, your location in the house? Mostly at night, Emma said, and they seem strongest in the master bedroom, and my studio, which used to be a nursery, I think. Interesting. Margaret tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table. The nursery would have been where Evelyn spent much of her time, according to accounts. She turned it into a sitting room for herself, away from Theodore's critical eye. Wait, Daniel interjected. You're talking as if you believe what Emma is experiencing is real. Margaret smiled faintly. I've lived in Blackwood Hill my entire life, Mr. Chen. The Wakefield house has generated stories for generations. Am I certain your wife is hearing the actual voices of people long dead? No, but I'm not certain she isn't either. She began gathering the materials to return them to their boxes. If you really want answers, I suggest you search the house thoroughly for Dr. Conroy's research. A man who dedicated his retirement to studying a phenomenon wouldn't leave without documenting his findings. As they prepared to leave, Margaret held out a business card. My personal number is on the back. If you find anything, or if the voices tell you something specific about Evelyn or Clara, I'd appreciate a call. The Historical Society is always looking to fill gaps in our records, even if those gaps are filled by information from ghosts. Daniel asked with a wry smile. History is history, Mr. Chen, no matter how it comes to light. Margaret walked them to the door. And one more thing, be careful with that house. Whether it's haunted or simply has bad acoustics, it has a way of affecting people who live there. Dr. Conroy was a rational scientific man when he arrived in Blackwood Hill, but in his later years, local children called him the crazy old man on the hill. The drive back to the house was quiet, both Emma and Daniel lost in their own thoughts. The autumn day had turned overcast, and as they wound up the hill toward their property, the Victorian silhouette stood stark against the grey sky, its ornate trim and multiple chimneys, giving it a Gothic aspect that seemed more ominous than charming now. What do you think? Emma finally asked as Daniel parked the car. About Dr. Conroy's theory, I mean. Daniel switched off the engine, but made no move to get out. I think it's more plausible than actual ghosts. If certain materials can record and store data, like magnetic tape or digital media, then maybe there's some natural equivalent we don't fully understand yet. He shrugged. It's still a stretch, but it's at least based on scientific principles. So you believe me now, that I'm really hearing something? I never thought you were making it up, Emma, Daniel said, reaching for her hand. I just thought there might be a more conventional explanation, and maybe there still is. But I also think we should find Conroy's research, if it exists. At the very least, it might help us understand what you're experiencing. Emma squeezed his hand, grateful for his support, even if he wasn't fully convinced of the supernatural nature of the voices. Where should we start looking? If I were a paranormal researcher, Daniel mused, and I'd been studying a house for decades, where would I hide my most important findings? They both looked up at the house looming before them. Somewhere safe, Emma answered. Somewhere hidden, but accessible. A thought struck her. The attic. We haven't really explored it yet. Daniel nodded. That's where I'd look first. And if not there, then behind walls, under floorboards, beneath the floorboards, Emma repeated, a chill running through her, as she recalled the discolored section in their bedroom, and the small holes surrounding it. Daniel, I think I know exactly where to start. The master bedroom felt colder than the rest of the house when they entered it. Emma tried to ignore the prickling sensation at the back of her neck, the feeling of being watched from every corner. She led Daniel to the discolored section of floor where their bed had stood. Look, she said, pointing to the small holes surrounding the stain. Something was nailed down here, then removed, and this section of flooring looks newer than the rest. Daniel knelt and ran his hand over the wood. You're right, this has been replaced, but it's still old, maybe 40 or 50 years, not recent. He examined the holes more closely. These could have been made by carpet tacks. Maybe there was a rug covering this area at some point. The voices mentioned a carpet, Emma said. The carpet hid it, but the floor remembers. Daniel looked up at her, his expression troubled. Dan, do you think whatever it is might be under here? Emma nodded. Do we have any tools to pry up the boards? Daniel hesitated. Emma, we're talking about intentionally damaging our new home, based on, well, whispers you heard. Are you sure about this? If I'm wrong, we can replace a few floorboards, Emma said firmly. But what if I'm right? What if Dr. Conroy found something and hid it back here for safekeeping? After a moment's consideration, Daniel sighed and stood up. I'll get some tools from the shed. But while he was gone, Emma examined the room more carefully, paying special attention to the walls. The vintage wallpaper was in remarkably good condition for its age, a subtle damask pattern in faded gold. Emma ran her fingers along the seams, looking for any indication that sections had been replaced, or that something might be hidden behind them. When her fingers reached the corner nearest the discolored flooring, she felt an irregularity, a small bubble in the wallpaper, as if something had been inserted behind it. Emma pressed gently, and the paper gave way slightly. As she leaned closer to investigate, the temperature around her plummeted. Her breath clouded in front of her face. She found it, whispered a voice just behind her. The doctor's message. Emma froze but didn't turn around. What message? She asked quietly. His warning, came the reply. For whoever came next. Emma carefully worked a fingernail under the edge of the bubble in the wallpaper, creating a small tear. She peeled back the paper to reveal a folded slip of yellowed paper tucked into a slit in the plaster wall. With trembling fingers, she extracted it. The note was handwritten in a precise, educated hand. To whom it may concern, if you have found this note, then you have likely already begun to experience the phenomenon. The house speaks, not metaphorically, but literally. I have spent 47 years documenting and studying these auditory manifestations, which I believe to be psychoacoustic impressions left by intense emotional events, primarily the murder of Evelyn Wakefield in 1922. My complete research is contained in journals, hidden where it all began. Trust nothing you hear after midnight. They lie to protect him. Aura Conroy, 2019. Emma was still staring at the note when Daniel returned, with a pry bar and hammer. I found something, she said, handing him the paper. Hidden behind. Daniel read it quickly, his face paling. Jesus, he muttered. So Evelyn was murdered, and Conroy knew it, and spent nearly half a century studying it. Emma added, my complete research is contained in journals, hidden where it all began. That has to be under the floor, where she died. Daniel nodded grimly. Let's find out. He positioned the pry bar at the edge of one of the boards in the discolored section, and applied pressure. The old wood creaked in protest, but began to lift. After several minutes of careful work, Daniel had loosened a board enough to remove it completely. Beneath was a small gap between the floorboards and the subflooring below, and wedged into that gap was a leather-bound book. That can't be all of it, Daniel said, reaching into the space to extract the book. If he studied this for 47 years, there should be more. Emma took the journal, while Daniel worked on removing additional boards. The book was well preserved, its leather binding showing only minimal wear. She opened it carefully, revealing a title page inscribed in the same handwriting as the note, The Whispering Walls, a scientific study of psychoacoustic residual phenomena, Volume 12, 1984 to 1985, Richard Conroy, Maryland. Volume 12, Emma read aloud. There are at least 11 others, and probably more after this one, Daniel added, removing another board. He lived until 2019, and this is only up to 1985. As Emma began to skim through the journal, Daniel continued to work. By the time he had removed 5 floorboards, he had uncovered a cache of leather-bound volumes, 19 in total, each representing a different period in Conroy's decades-long study. There's something else, Daniel said, reaching deeper into the space. He pulled out a small wooden box, its surface carved with intricate patterns. This was underneath the journals. The box was locked, but the key was taped to its underside, a common hiding place that suggested Dr. Conroy had wanted the contents to be found, just not accidentally. Daniel unlocked the box and opened it. Inside lay a folded sheet of aged paper, a small envelope, and what appeared to be a very old voice recorder, the kind that used miniature cassette tapes. These must be his original findings, Emma said, carefully unfolding the paper. It was a handwritten document, dated July 1972, shortly after Conroy had purchased the house. Initial assessment of Wakefield property, the heading read, upon taking possession of the house, I conducted preliminary tests in areas where auditory phenomena had been reported by previous owners. Results confirmed my hypothesis. Distinct vocalizations are detectable in the master bedroom, nursery, main staircase, and servants' quarters, particularly between the hours of 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. Most significant finding, floor in master bedroom, shows evidence of extensive bloodstains beneath newer floorboards, circa 1922, and contains metallic residue, consistent with the nails used in period furniture. Conjecture: Evelyn Wakefield was not killed in a fall on the stairs as officially reported, but was murdered in this room, likely by her husband James and/or father-in-law Theodore. Theory: the violent nature of her death, combined with the cover-up that followed, created a powerful emotional imprint that manifests audibly under certain conditions. The house literally remembers what happened here. The document continued with technical details about Conroy's testing methodology and initial recordings, but Emma's attention was drawn to the envelope. She opened it carefully to find a sepia-toned photograph of a young woman, clearly Evelyn Wakefield, sitting in what was now Emma's studio. The resemblance to the wedding photo they'd seen at the Historical Society was unmistakable, but this was a more casual portrait. Evelyn was smiling directly at the camera, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, looking relaxed and modern, despite the 1920s setting. She was beautiful, Emma murmured, showing the photo to Daniel. She was, he agreed. Wonder why Conroy had her photo hidden away with his research. Emma turned the photograph over. On the back was written, Evelyn Morris Wakefield, April 1922, 2 months before her death. Photo taken by Clara Jenkins. Clara, the maid who later killed herself. Emma said, "They must have been close for Clara to take such an informal portrait of her employer." Daniel picked up the voice recorder. "Let's see if this still works." To their surprise, the ancient device powered on when Daniel pressed the play button. The tape inside was cued to the beginning. A crackling hiss filled the room, followed by Dr. Conroy's measured voice. June 14, 1973, 2:37 a.m. Master bedroom, northeast corner, temperature 64 degrees Fahrenheit, falling, barometric pressure 29.92 inches, and steady, full moon. Third attempt to establish direct communication. There was a pause, then Conroy's voice again, this time addressing someone unseen. "If there is anyone here who wishes to communicate, I am listening. I am not here to disturb you, but to understand what happened in this house." Another pause, longer this time. Then faintly but distinctly, a female voice. "He's coming. He's always coming." Night after night, Emma and Daniel exchanged shocked glances. The voice on the tape was the same one Emma had been hearing from the walls. Conroy's voice returned. "Who is coming?" "James Theodore." "Both," replied the ghostly voice. "Father and son. They argue, then agree. I am the problem. I must be removed." "Are you Evelyn Wakefield?" Conroy asked. "I was," came the reply. "Now I am part of the house. The wood drank my blood, the walls absorbed my screams. Now we speak together, all of us who know the truth." "What truth? What happened to you, Evelyn?" The recording suddenly filled with static, as if a strong electrical interference had disrupted it. When it cleared, a different voice was speaking. Male, authoritative, angry. "Get out. Leave this house. This is not your concern." Conroy's voice, remarkably steady. "Who am I speaking with now?" "The master of this house," rumbled the male voice. "You are not welcome here, doctor. Your questions are not welcome. Leave this buried, or you will join us in the walls." The recording ended abruptly, with the click of the stop button. Emma and Daniel sat in stunned silence, the implications of what they'd just heard sinking in. "That was real," Daniel finally said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "That wasn't just house noises or my wife's imagination. Those voices, they're actually here, and they're not all friendly," Emma added quietly. She picked up the journal marked Volume 1, and began flipping through it. According to Conroy's notes, the male voice belonged to Theodore Wakefield, Evelyn's father-in-law. Conroy believed Theodore was the mastermind behind Evelyn's murder, though James, her husband, was complicit. "But why kill her?" Daniel asked. "Margaret mentioned something about Evelyn not producing an heir, but that hardly seems." "There was more to it," Emma said, reading further. According to Conroy's research, Evelyn had threatened to leave James and take half the Wakefield fortune with her. Apparently she had evidence of illegal business practices that could have ruined the family, and she paused, her eyes widening, as she scanned the page. "And she was pregnant, but the baby wasn't James's." Conroy speculates that she was having an affair with someone in town, possibly even the local doctor. Theodore saw this as the final insult to the Wakefield name, and decided she had to be eliminated. "So they killed her in this room," Daniel said, looking at the exposed floorboards, "and then covered it up to look like an accident on the stairs." "And Clara Jenkins, the maid, saw everything," Emma continued, flipping ahead in the journal. "She was devoted to Evelyn, and couldn't live with the knowledge that the Wakefields had gotten away with murder. When she threatened to go to the authorities, Theodore pressured her into silence. When that didn't work, they staged her suicide." Daniel finished grimly. "That's Conroy's theory. He spent decades gathering evidence, interviewing elderly locals who remembered the incidents, researching police records, even analyzing the physical evidence in the house itself." Emma closed the journal. but he never published his findings or went to the authorities. I wonder why. Daniel picked up another of the leather-bound volumes. Let's find out. If he spent 47 years studying this, there must be a reason he kept it hidden. As the afternoon wore into evening, Emma and Daniel immersed themselves in Dr. Conroy's journals, piecing together his decades-long investigation into the tragedy that had occurred in their new home. The more they read, the clearer it became that Conroy had been convinced the voices were not supernatural, but scientifically explicable phenomena. Emotional energy somehow recorded and stored within the physical structure of the house itself. In the later volumes, however, Conroy's scientific detachment began to waver. His entries became more personal, more troubled. He wrote of hearing the voices, even when his recording equipment detected nothing, of seeing shadowy figures at the edges of his vision, of waking to find objects moved from where he'd left them. The final volume, covering 2018 to 2019, was the most disturbing. Conroy's handwriting had deteriorated, his once precise scientific observations giving way to rambling, paranoid passages. He claimed Theodore Wakefield was trying to drive him from the house, that he felt a constant oppressive presence watching his every move. The last entry, dated just 3 days before his death, read, "I know now why I was drawn to this house. It is not random chance that led me here, but design, Evelyn's design. She has been waiting for someone to hear her, to believe her, to expose the truth of what happened. But Theodore knows this too. He grows stronger as I grow weaker. The medication no longer helps. My heart cannot take this constant strain. If I die here, I fear I will join them in these walls, trapped forever, in this endless cycle of revelation and concealment. I must get out. Tomorrow, I will leave this cursed place and never return. The journals will remain hidden, where I found the first evidence, beneath the floorboards where her blood was spilled. Perhaps someday, someone stronger than I am will finish what I started." Conroy never left. According to his obituary, he died of a heart attack in the house the very next day. As darkness fell outside, Emma closed the final journal with shaking hands. "He was trying to leave," she whispered, but something or someone stopped him. Daniel, who had been examining the rest of Conroy's materials, looked up with a troubled expression. "There's something else." According to these notes, Conroy believed the voices were strongest on significant dates, the anniversary of Evelyn's death, for instance. "When did she die?" Emma asked. Daniel consulted one of the journals. "June 17th, 1922. "That's not for months," Emma said. "But I've been hearing them clearly for days now." "There's another date he mentions," Daniel said, his voice growing tense. "The date Theodore Wakefield died, October 31st, 1924. Emma felt a chill run through her. "Halloween. That's tomorrow." Daniel nodded grimly. "And according to Conroy, it's when Theodore's presence is strongest in the house, when he's most able to influence the physical world." They looked at each other, the same thought clearly reflected in both their expressions. They needed to leave the house before tomorrow night. "We should pack some essentials," Daniel said, standing up. "Stay at a hotel for a few days, while we figure out what to do." Emma nodded, rising to join him. "I'll call Margaret from the Historical Society. She should know what we found. Maybe she can help us decide what to do with all this." She gestured at the journals and recordings. As they moved toward the door, the temperature in the room suddenly plummeted. The door slammed shut with such force that the walls seemed to vibrate. The electric lights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness, broken only by the dim glow of the setting sun through the windows. "You are not leaving," rumbled a deep voice from every corner of the room at once. "No one leaves until I permit it." Emma clutched Daniel's arm, her fingers digging into his flesh. "Theodore," she whispered. "The doctor tried to leave," continued the voice, See how well that ended for him. Daniel stepped forward, positioning himself between Emma and the center of the room. We're not Dr. Conroy, he said firmly. We have nothing to do with your family's past. We just want to leave peacefully. A harsh laugh echoed through the room. You invaded my home. You unearthed my secrets. You gave voice to her lies. There is no peaceful departure now. The temperature dropped further. Emma could see her breath clouding before her face. The journals on the floor began to rustle, their pages turning as if caught in a breeze. Though the air was completely still, tomorrow night, I will reclaim what is mine, Theodore's voice promised, and you will join the others, in the walls, in the floors, in the very fabric of this house, forever. With a sudden surge, the lights came back on. The oppressive cold retreated, though not completely. Emma and Daniel stood frozen, staring at each other with wide eyes. We need to leave, Emma whispered. Now, Daniel nodded, reaching for the doorknob. It turned freely under his hand, and they fled the room, leaving Conroy's journals scattered across the exposed floorboards. It won't start, Daniel said, turning the ignition key for the third time. The car's engine groaned, but refused to catch. This makes no sense. It was fine this morning. Emma stared out the windshield at the house, which seemed to loom larger against the darkening sky. It's him, Theodore. He's preventing us from leaving. That's ridiculous, Daniel snapped, though his voice lacked conviction. It's just a dead battery, or something mechanical. I'll call AAA. He pulled out his phone, then frowned. No signal. He held the device up, moving it around, as if searching for reception. I had full bars earlier. Emma checked her own phone. The screen showed no service, where the signal indicator should have been. Mine too, she said quietly. They sat in silence for a moment, both acutely aware of the isolation of their property. The nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile away down the winding driveway, and walking into town would take over an hour. What about landline? Emma suggested. The house has one, doesn't it? In the kitchen. Daniel nodded slowly. It was working yesterday when I called the real estate agent. He looked back at the house, but that means going back inside. We don't have much choice, Emma said, and it's not Halloween yet. Maybe Theodore's influence is still limited until tomorrow. They re-entered the house cautiously through the kitchen door. The old-fashioned telephone hung on the wall beside the refrigerator, a concession to the spotty cell reception in the area that they had initially found quaint. Daniel lifted the receiver and put it to his ear. His expression told Emma everything she needed to know. Dead? She asked. He nodded, hanging up the receiver. If I were a betting man, I'd say the line's been cut. What now? Emma asked, hugging herself against the chill that seemed to permeate the entire house now. Daniel thought for a moment. We could walk to the nearest neighbor, use their phone, or walk toward town until we get cell reception again. In the dark, Emma glanced out the kitchen window at the rapidly fading twilight. Through the woods, we have flashlights, Daniel said, and it's better than staying here, isn't it? Before Emma could respond, the lights in the kitchen flickered and went out. Unlike before, they didn't return. The house was plunged into darkness, except for the faint moonlight filtering through the windows. Power outage, Daniel said, his voice tight. Perfect timing. Where are the flashlights? Emma asked. There should be one in that drawer by the sink, Daniel replied, moving carefully across the dark kitchen. Emma heard him rummaging through the drawer, followed by a muttered curse. Not here, she guessed. It was here yesterday. Daniel's voice had an edge of panic now. I put fresh batteries in it, and everything. There are candles in the dining room, Emma remembered, in that box of emergency supplies we haven't unpacked yet. They made their way cautiously through the dark house to the dining room, where several boxes of non-essential items still sat against the wall. Daniel located the one labeled emergency supplies and tore it open. Here, he said, producing a packet of candles and a book of matches. He lit one, the small flame casting long shadows across the ornate dining room. As the candle light flickered over the walls, Emma noticed something she hadn't seen before, a dark stain spreading slowly down from the ceiling, like water damage from a leak. But it hadn't rained in days, and the stain hadn't been there earlier. "Daniel," she whispered, pointing. He raised the candle higher, illuminating the stain. As they watched, it continued to spread, the dark liquid seeping through the wallpaper in rivulets that looked disturbingly like blood. "She fell here first," whispered a voice from behind them. Not Theodore's commanding rumble, but a softer, feminine tone. "Before they dragged her upstairs, her head hit the corner of the table. The blood, so much blood." Emma spun around, but saw nothing in the dim candlelight. "Evelyn," she called softly. "Clara," corrected the voice. "I saw everything. I tried to help her, but it was too late. They made me help clean it up. Said I'd be accused too if I told anyone, but I couldn't live with it. Couldn't live with what they made me do to her." The temperature in the room dropped further. The candle's flame flickered wildly, then steadied. "He's coming," Clara's voice said urgently. "You must hide. The attic. My hiding place. He rarely goes there." A sudden heavy thud echoed from the floor above them, like a body falling. Then another, slow, deliberate footsteps crossed the ceiling over their heads. "Hurry," Clara urged. "Before he finds you, I'll show you the way." A faint luminescence appeared near the dining room door. A human shape formed of mist and moonlight. The figure of a young woman in a maid's uniform gestured for them to follow, then drifted toward the main staircase. Emma and Daniel exchanged a terrified glance. "Do we trust her?" Daniel whispered. "She tried to expose what happened," Emma replied, "and paid for it with her life. I think we can trust her more than we can trust this house." They followed the spectral figure through the darkened house, the single candle casting just enough light to prevent them from stumbling. The ghost of Clara Jenkins led them up the main staircase, pausing at the top, as if listening for something. The footsteps above had stopped. Clara's ghost drifted down the hallway, past the master bedroom, toward a door at the end that Emma recognized as the entrance to the attic stairs. As they approached, Emma felt a resistance in the air, as if they were walking against a strong wind, though nothing visibly moved around them. "He knows," Clara's voice said, her ghostly form flickering. "Hurry." Daniel reached for the attic door, but before his fingers touched the knob, the temperature around them plunged to freezing. Clara's ghost scattered like mist in a gale, her face a mask of terror, as she dissipated. "Conspiring with the help, just like Evelyn," boomed Theodore's voice from everywhere at once. "Some lessons are never learned." The candle in Daniel's hand extinguished itself, plunging them into total darkness. Emma felt something cold brush against her cheek, like fingers made of ice. She screamed, stumbling backward into Daniel. "The time for games is over," Theodore's voice continued. "You know too much now, just like the doctor, just like Clara, just like my disappointing daughter-in-law." Daniel fumbled with the matches, trying to relight the candle. The book of matches was suddenly ripped from his hand by an unseen force, clattering to the floor somewhere in the darkness. "Back downstairs," Daniel hissed, grabbing Emma's arm. "We need to get out of this house now." They turned to retrace their steps, but in the absolute darkness, Emma lost her orientation. She moved forward cautiously, one hand on the wall, the other gripping Daniel's sleeve. "I think it's this way," she whispered. The wall beneath her fingertips suddenly felt different, rough and damp, as if the elegant wallpaper had been replaced with raw, wet plaster. Emma jerked her hand away with a gasp. "The walls absorb everything," Theodore's voice said, now sounding as if he was speaking directly into her ear. "Blood, screams, souls, soon yours will join the collection." Emma felt Daniel's grip on her arm tighten. "Ignore him," he said firmly. "He's trying to scare us into paralysis. Keep moving." They inched forward in the darkness, using the wall as a guide despite its disturbing texture. Emma tried to visualize the hallway's layout in her mind. The master bedroom should be on their right, then two smaller bedrooms, then the top of the stairs. After what seemed like an eternity of cautious progress, Emma's foot met empty air. She teetered on the edge of what must be the staircase, Daniel's grip on her arm the only thing preventing her from tumbling down. "The stairs," she gasped. "We found them." They began their careful descent, one step at a time in the impenetrable darkness. Halfway down, Emma heard a noise from above, a solid thud followed by slow, deliberate footsteps. "He's coming," she whispered. "Keep moving," Daniel urged. They quickened their pace, still feeling their way down the stairs. As they neared the bottom, the front door became visible, a rectangle slightly less black than the surrounding darkness, moonlight outlining its frame. "Almost there," Daniel murmured. A gust of frigid air swept up the staircase, carrying with it the scent of decay. The footsteps behind them accelerated, no longer deliberate but rushing, pounding against the steps. "No escape," roared Theodore's voice, no longer disembodied, but directly behind them. Emma felt something grab her ankle, something impossibly cold and strong. She screamed as she was yanked backward, her grip on Daniel's arm breaking. She fell hard against the stairs, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. "Emma!" Daniel shouted, reaching for her in the darkness. She felt herself being dragged upward, her body bumping painfully against the stairs. She kicked and thrashed, trying to break free of the invisible grip, but it was unyielding. "Daniel!" she screamed. "Help me!" She heard him scrambling up the stairs after her, but the force pulling her was too swift. Within seconds, she was at the top of the staircase, being dragged down the hallway toward the master bedroom. She struggled too. Theodore's voice said conversationally, as if discussing the weather, "Evelyn, such a fighter." It made her death all the more satisfying. Emma clawed at the carpet, trying to slow her inexorable progress toward the bedroom. "Let me go," she shouted. "We'll leave. We won't tell anyone what we found." "Too late for that," Theodore replied. "Far, far too late." She was pulled across the threshold into the master bedroom. The door slammed shut behind her, cutting off Daniel's shouts from the hallway. To her surprise, this room was not dark. A ghostly blue-white light emanated from the exposed floorboards where they had found Conroy's journals, illuminating the space in an eerie glow. The invisible force released her ankle. Emma scrambled to her feet, backing away until she hit the far wall. For the first time, she could see her tormentor. Theodore Wakefield stood by the exposed floorboards, not a misty apparition like Clara had been, but a solid-looking figure of a tall, broad-shouldered man in early 20th century dress. His face was stern, aristocratic, with a thick mustache and cold eyes that seemed to bore into Emma's soul. The only indication that he wasn't truly physical was the faint luminescence that outlined his form, and the way the room's features were dimly visible through his body. "Welcome to the scene of the crime," Theodore said, his mouth curving in a cruel smile. "Where family disappointments are handled." Outside the door, Daniel was pounding and shouting, trying to force his way in. The solid oak didn't even rattle in its frame, despite his efforts. "What do you want?" Emma asked, trying to keep her voice steady. I want what I've always wanted, to protect the Wakefield name and legacy, to keep our secrets buried." Theodore gestured to the journals scattered across the floor. "The doctor nearly exposed us. I stopped him. Now I must stop you as well." "We're not trying to expose anything," Emma insisted. "We just want to leave. We'll sell the house, move away, forget everything we learned." Theodore laughed, a hollow sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "You humans always bargain when you're afraid." Evelyn did the same. "I won't tell anyone," she promised, even as James held her down, and I pressed the pillow over her face. A new voice joined the conversation. Feminine, familiar. "You're lying, Theodore." As always, a second figure materialized beside the bed, a young woman with dark hair and defiant eyes. Evelyn Wakefield appeared much as she had in the photograph Emma had seen, though her spectral form bore the marks of violence, bruises on her neck, a gash across her forehead. "You didn't smother me," Evelyn continued, her voice gaining strength. You beat me, first here, then dragged me to the stairs, to make it look like an accident. James didn't help you. He was too weak, too drunk. It was you alone, Theodore, always you. Theodore's form flickered with rage. You betrayed this family, he snarled, carrying another man's child, threatening to take our money, our reputation. I threatened to tell the truth, Evelyn corrected, about your business practices, your bribes, your threats. The lumber empire built on corruption and violence. Other ghostly figures began to appear around the room. A young woman in a maid's uniform, whom Emma recognized as Clara, an elderly man with spectacles, who must be Dr. Conroy, and several others Emma didn't recognize. We've been waiting, Evelyn said, addressing Emma directly now, waiting for someone who could hear us, who would find the truth and set us free. Childish fantasies, Theodore spat. There is no freedom from this house, not for any of us. He turned to Emma, his form growing larger, more menacing, and soon, not for you either. He lunged toward her, hands outstretched. Emma pressed herself against the wall with nowhere to flee. But before Theodore could reach her, the other spirits converged on him, their ethereal forms passing through his, disrupting his cohesion. He roared in fury, as his shape began to destabilize. The journals, Evelyn cried to Emma, finish what the doctor started. Tell our story. It's the only way to free us all, even him, though he doesn't deserve it. The door suddenly burst open. Daniel standing there with a sledgehammer he must have retrieved from the shed. His eyes widened at the spectral battle taking place before him. Emma, he shouted. Come on. She darted toward him, pausing only to scoop up as many of Conroy's journals as she could carry. As she reached the doorway, she glanced back. Theodore was regaining cohesion, throwing off the other spirits one by one. Run, Evelyn urged. We'll hold him as long as we can, but hurry. His power grows as midnight approaches. Emma and Daniel fled down the hallway, the sledgehammer in his hand, and the journals clutched to her chest. Behind them, Theodore's roar of rage echoed through the house, rattling windows and shaking the chandelier in the foyer below. They reached the stairs and descended rapidly, no longer hampered by darkness. The ghostly confrontation upstairs seemed to have filled the house with an eerie luminescence that provided just enough light to see by. The front door, Daniel gasped as they reached the bottom. If we can just get outside. They sprinted across the foyer, but as Daniel reached for the door handle, an icy blast of air slammed into them from behind. The journals were ripped from Emma's arms, pages fluttering as they scattered across the floor. She was lifted off her feet and thrown against the wall, the impact nearly knocking her unconscious. Daniel turned, raising the sledgehammer defensively. Theodore's form materialized between them and the door, more solid-looking than before, pulsing with malevolent energy. The hour approaches, he intoned. My hour, when the veil is thinnest, when I am strongest. He glanced at an ornate grandfather clock in the corner of the foyer. Midnight, Halloween, when I died, then when I rule. The clock's hand stood at 11:58 p.m., though Emma was certain it had been much earlier when they tried to leave the house. Somehow, time had accelerated within these walls, rushing toward the moment of Theodore's greatest power. Daniel swung the sledgehammer through Theodore's form. It passed through without resistance, throwing Daniel off balance. Theodore laughed and gestured. The sledgehammer wrenched itself from Daniel's grip, flying across the foyer to crash into a mirror, shattering it into 1,000 glittering shards. 2 minutes, Theodore said pleasantly, and then you join us permanently. Emma struggled to her feet, her head spinning from the impact. Why keep us here? She demanded, playing for time. Why not just let us leave? Because you know, Theodore replied simply. Because you found what was hidden. Because you found what was hidden. Because you listened to her. His form flickered with anger. Always her. Always Evelyn. Turning people against me. Even in death. You murdered her. Emma said. You covered it up. killed Clara to keep her quiet. You're a monster. I protected my family, Theodore insisted. My legacy. My name. She would have destroyed everything, and now your name is forgotten, Daniel said, edging slowly toward Emma. The Wakefield lumber empire is gone. Your house belongs to strangers. All you have left is this haunting and empty legacy. Theodore's form twisted with rage. The ghostly light surrounding him flaring, the grandfather clock began to chime, signaling midnight's arrival. Enough. Theodore roared. Your time is over. He surged toward them, his form expanding to fill the foyer, the temperature plummeting until ice crystals formed on the walls and floor. Emma felt a crushing pressure against her chest, as if massive hands were squeezing the life from her. Beside her, Daniel fell to his knees, gasping for breath. The clock continued to chime. 3, 4, 5. Through her dimming vision, Emma saw something moving on the staircase, spectral figures descending, dozens of them, the ghosts from throughout the house's long history, led by Evelyn and Clara, with Dr. Conroy among them. It's time, Theodore, Evelyn said, her voice somehow cutting through the clock's chimes. Time to let go, time to move on. Never, Theodore snarled, but his attention had shifted to the approaching spirits, the pressure on Emma and Daniel, lessening slightly. 7, 8, 9. The truth is known now, Clara said, written in the doctor's journals, witnessed by the living. She gestured to Emma and Daniel. Your secret is exposed. Master Wakefield, your power is broken. I still have this night, Theodore roared. My night. My hour. 10, 11, 12. As the final chime echoed through the house, something unexpected happened. Instead of growing stronger as midnight struck, Theodore's form began to unravel at the edges. He stared at his dissolving hands in horror. What is happening? He demanded. This is my hour of power. Not anymore, Evelyn said softly. The cycle is broken. The truth is told. Your time is over. The other ghosts moved forward, surrounding Theodore. As they touched his dissolving form, they too began to fade, their expressions peaceful, releasing. No, Theodore screamed, his voice becoming fainter as his form dispersed. My house, my legacy. Thank you, Evelyn's voice whispered to Emma as her ghost began to fade, for hearing us, for finding the truth. The house is yours now, truly yours. In a final surge of light, the spirits vanished completely. The oppressive cold lifted, and the house's normal illumination returned. As the power came back on, Emma and Daniel found themselves alone in the foyer, surrounded by the scattered pages of Dr. Conroy's journals. For a long moment, they sat in stunned silence, processing what they had witnessed. Then Daniel staggered to his feet and helped Emma up. Are you hurt? He asked, examining her for injuries. Just bruised, I think, Emma replied, her voice hoarse. Are they gone? Daniel looked around the now ordinary foyer. I think so. It feels different now, lighter. As if to confirm his assessment, the front door swung open on its own, a gentle autumn breeze flowing into the house. Outside, the night was clear and calm, with stars visible above the trees. We should still leave, Daniel said, at least for tonight, just to be safe. Emma nodded, then began gathering the scattered journal pages. We need to take these with us, tell their story. Like Evelyn asked. Do you think that's what freed them? Daniel asked, kneeling to help collect the papers, finally exposing the truth. I think the truth has power, Emma said, and secrets have weight. They've all been carrying this burden for almost a century. Theodore, most of all, though he wouldn't admit it. They carefully gathered Conroy's journals and the other evidence they discovered. Outside, Daniel tried the car again. This time, the engine started immediately. As they drove down the winding driveway, Emma looked back at the house. In the moonlight, it no longer seemed menacing but merely old, a beautiful, historic structure with a troubled past now laid to rest. What do we do now? Daniel asked, as they reached the main road. With the house, I mean. Do we sell it? Go back? Emma thought for a moment. I think we go back, she said finally. Not tonight, but tomorrow. The house is just a house now. And I think it wants us there, to make new memories, to replace the old ones, to give it a future, instead of just a past. Daniel reached across the console to take her hand. Are you sure? No, Emma admitted, with a small smile. But I'm willing to find out. As they drove toward town, in search of a hotel for the night, Emma thought she caught a glimpse of a woman standing at her studio window. Not a ghost this time, but a memory, or perhaps a premonition of herself, paintbrush in hand, finally at home, in the house on Blackwood Hill, where the walls had once whispered of tragedy, but now held only the promise of peace.